Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dragon Prince video. This is just going to be some kind of speculation, initial thoughts as we head into Season 2 next week. We have 9 episodes coming out next Friday, so a week from now. I will be reviewing them on my channel. Given that we now know it's 9 episodes, the way I'm probably going to do it is you'll probably see 3 videos from me on Friday. One covering the first 3 episodes, the second video covering episodes 4, 5, and 6, and then the last video covering 7, 8, and 9, and that will be my initial thoughts on my watch through of The Dragon Prince Season 2. So expect that. As far as a podcast goes, I'm not really sure how Greg overly feels about it. I remember that, even though I'm a bit I'm not fully convinced on the show just yet, I got the impression that Greg was kind of even more not convinced. So the podcast may or may not happen. I don't know if that's something we necessarily want to do, commit to doing all the seasons like we did with Voltron. But again, I think a lot of that will depend on how good Season 2 is. One of our kind of biggest, complaints with the first season of Dragon Prince was just how they sort of teased the show as having this big lore and stuff like that, but then didn't do a lot with it in the first season. It was only 9 episodes, but they left it so short that you didn't really get a lot to latch onto just yet. So I think that's a large part of what this season is going to have to do, is just, at least for me, use its lore more, introduce more of the world building, and at least based on the trailer, it seems like that's exactly what they're planning on doing. The first thing that they did was obviously solve the main problem that I think most people have with the show, which was the animation, the frame rate of the animation. That is confirmed to be fixed, at least the main problem. We'll see in action over the course of full episodes how it has changed, but I think what most people were saying was that frame rate was the main problem, and they fixed that for the most part. So I didn't really notice any major problems in the trailer, so that's a huge positive that they've listened to that feedback and corrected it as soon as possible. I was a bit worried early on in some of the first things that they were saying in interviews after Season 1 that they were a bit overly explaining away the criticism by this is our artistic intent. But I think what some of the articles I've read were they noticed that the feedback was so focused that this is the problem that they kind of just had to do it and correct it, and that the general fan criticism is so clear that this is the problem that our artistic intent is fine, we'll fix that problem, and they're still able to do a lot with it. So that's great. The other thing from social media as well as the trailer was that it seems like they are going to heavily expand the world here in terms of explaining stuff to us, introducing us to new species, new places. I think on social media they showed screenshots and also gave names to a bunch of different rulers of different specific areas of the world. And then the trailer shows Sunfire elves, obviously Moonshadow elves, that other type of elf we've seen I think twice before. One is, I think they're both from the very first episode of the show where they do the kind of establishment thing of what happened in the past, and you see the kind of starlight elves, it almost seems like is what it is. They have a star kind of type pattern on over their body, and the star bits basically glow, and I think we saw someone with those type of hands with the star effect opening up the scroll that they kind of used to sort of tell that story. So that seems like a very sort of significant species, so that'll be fun to see. And then I think just those two things together just show us what they're doing with the world building. And then what sort of surprised me a little bit in the trailer, but I'm kind of glad about, is that they're committing to doing a lot more with just dragons in general. That it's not going to just be Zim as the Dragon Prince, who's the only dragon we get to see. Is just this baby one that they have. No, it seems because of his birth, the other dragons are now kind of a bit more active, and they seem to be directly involved in some of the action that's happening here. And there were some pretty intense shots showing, obviously the one from the main promotional material, who we don't know a lot about, and then this other dragon as well, who seems to get injured at some point. That all seems very, very interesting to me to just explore. I think probably what interests me the most about this show is how the different factions of this world work, because I like the general lore setup here of like the humans after what happened to the Dragon King because of dark magic. All humans were banished to one side of the world. It's the side that doesn't have as much magic, so all the magical creatures and species are on one side of the world, and then the humans are there with their dark magic. And there's the whole question about like, should they have done that? Should they have banished all humans for the actions of just one? And how I assume that is going to at some point get resolved, because why do you set up something like that if you aren't going to then tackle that as a general topic? And what way is it being tackled? It's being tackled by the fact that our main kind of hero group already consists of humans and a Moonshadow Elf, and then there's always the potential, they have a dragon with them now as well, which is a positive, and there's always the potential that other species get involved, their group gets bigger, and just their group existing and helping the world is kind of proof that maybe they should, like they did in the past, by making that change to separate, maybe they can make a big change to come back together. That's maybe looking further into the future, but it's something to keep an eye out for with regards to just how they overall do this, because a lot of the issues have sort of been caused by the lie of, yes, we technically killed the Dragon Prince, but actually no, we didn't, we stole it, and how few people actually know about that. So lot of interesting things to think about. Like, as much as they didn't go overboard with the lore from establishing every single location in the world, every single species, they gave a good general lore introduction of the main story conflict that's happening, and anything they can do to expand on that is going to be good. Like, they talk about how I think it's the Sunfire Elves are kind of at the humans' border, and they're really interesting, of course, because we got the setup for what their weapons were like, of just the ability of them to heat up and be almost cut through anything, and that's going to be interesting to see just how dangerous they are when we get to meet them. As I said, the other species of elves, and just in general, I think more on the Moonshadow Elves as well, because Rayla will still have to deal with the fact that she's sort of on her own, and sort of there's a sense of betrayal between her and her tribe, and what way is exactly that going to work as we go forward. Because the trailer didn't seem to focus all that much on Rayla, apart from the whole human Rayla gag, which I do like that. More so than her doing it, I like the fact that Ezran was very kind of meta about it, and it's just like, oh guys, you're gonna love this. Human Rayla is awesome, because it's one of the kind of most liked gags from the first season. And just them sort of calling it out kind of in universe, it's a fun little thing, and that I think was a cool way to sort of get to the end of the trailer. Callum and the whole dark magic thing is going to be interesting as well, because of course all the magic he used in the first season was because he had that primal stone, and he says in the trailer that he wants to learn primal magic, but then immediately they cut to but not everyone has that power inside them. And it seems like he thinks he doesn't have it, and so commits to learning dark magic, and potentially knows about the secret behind it, that it's sucking magic out of magical creatures, but maybe tries to use it in a good way. And then the whole thing within all of this that we can't forget, of course, is that Callum is not part of the actual royal bloodline as such, so we don't know, I suppose, his origins, and that's still a bit of a mystery. There's the whole letter thing, I don't think he has it anymore, that the king kind of gave to him. That probably is something about his past that will have to be explored at some point, so that's something that they can always come back to. And just there's a lot of little mysteries in the show like that. I think some of the way they've spoken about Zim's mother, and the whole, what is it? Viren got the mirror that he kind of tortures the Moonshadow Elf with. Runan, I think the previous. I'm just trying to remember all these different things. Runan was actually killed, I think. Yes, and he tortured him with the kind of mirror, the magical mirror that he got from the. What was the exact wording on it? It was he implied it was the bedroom of the the queen of the dragons, and it's like some of the implications, especially with how small it was and stuff like that, were like, that does the queen of the dragons have some sort of a like human-esque form, and she's like different than everyone else, and the fact that dragons are magical creatures, and like they're of course going to do the standard dragon thing, but is there a different twist on this as well, is an interesting thing to think about. So as much as I wouldn't say I'm fully invested in the show just yet, there's a lot I want to figure out, and if they do it well of presenting not just the general story of our main heroes, but also good world building and like building of like almost like the politics between the different species, the different rulers, they could really go places with this. Because a large part of why I suppose first even gave the show a chance was the way they were talking about Wonderstorm and what their project was initially. Before we even knew it was called the Dragon Prince, they were talking about how they were going to go like full kind of like expanded universe, like cross media thing, where like the show will be supported by video games, by other forms of media. And we know the video game is in development and seems to have been for a while, and they've talked about it a little bit. The main thing being that it seems like they're committing to the video game not really being a part or a retelling of the story of the characters within the show. And it's more of a world building style game where like you'll learn more about the world through the game rather than potentially telling you part of Callum and Rayla's story. And I'm actually all for that. I'm glad that they're doing that they're basically just using it to build the world. And if it is just stuff like you're maybe just playing these general battles, you're maybe playing generic characters or something like that, but you're exploring the world, that's great to me. That's exactly what you need to do. I don't think not everything needs to just be all about those main characters being front and center on every single thing that you have going on, because otherwise you can really limit yourself with what you can do in the universe. And they're almost kind of telling you from the start that like Callum, Rayla and so on, they'll have their story, but because we are expanding the universe from the start, their story is just going to be one aspect of this world. There's stories that are taking place all over this world with other characters, different timeline, different times in the timeline, and so on. So that's something I also want to see, and I hope they kind of commit to it well in terms of like announcing potentially comics, books, in addition to the game. Of course, I don't think we know anything about what the gameplay is for it. They've just kind of more or less said what their intent is with regards to like what the game is going to sort of be as a thing. It's not going to be a retelling of Season 1 or Season 2. The impression I got was that like potentially like our main characters may not even be in it, or at least as a focus. So that definitely excites me. Anything else I want to say here? Like I said, there is a lot going on here. Now part of that is definitely because they only did 9 episodes and they left it wide open in terms of like, okay, the dragon prince has just hatched. That's a notable part of the show. But then on the other side of the story, like Claudia and Soren are like, they've just located them, and that's a nice enough cliffhanger. But I think if you were pacing the show properly, that's like your mid-season cliffhanger. That's not like a end of season cliffhanger. So, I still think the show has to, I suppose, come back from that first cliffhanger that was a little bit disappointing just with the lack of number of episodes, and get you back in and lead to, I suppose, a proper cliffhanger ahead of, like, I assume the Season 3, which will be confirmed. I definitely get the impression that it's probably just them and Netflix being a little bit cautious, but if Season 2 comes out and is a success, I get the impression they'll do what happened with Voltron, where, we didn't hear a lot about how much exactly they're going to do after like the first or second season, but then they just announced that, yeah, there are still there are 64 more episodes coming, and that was the entire rest of the run of that show was confirmed immediately. I'd like to see something like that happen with the Dragon Prince, just so we know exactly kind of where we're going. I like a lot of the character stuff that they're doing. The world building, I think, needs more development, which it looks like we're getting. So in that sense, I think they've got all the pieces. They just need to sort of present them to us really well. Them fixing the animation is a good sign from the creators in terms of like interaction with fans. And as much as I don't think it's perfect the way they're doing the social media stuff, especially like on Twitter, I think they post too much is probably my problem with the Dragon Prince Twitter account. In that they post just as much like fan art and just like retweeting really generic, praises of the show, as they do post news about the show. Whereas I probably prefer they stick to like treating their posts as like every post is kind of important when it comes out. Otherwise, it just feels a little bit like it's just Reddit as a Twitter account. Whereas I'd more like it to just be a general good source of information about the show, and some of that gets lost because like sometimes they'll just post like 10 pieces of fan art in a row and have to scroll all the way down to get to the other stuff. So, there's little improvements here and there that they can do, but in general, I think the show's in a good spot as we head into season 2, and I am excited, but at the same time, a lot of it is just because of season 1 didn't do all that much that I'm kind of cautiously excited. And I watched the trailer, and as much as like there were some cool moments in it, I was also like, do I need to do a trailer analysis for this? Not really. Instead, I just decided to do this general discussion video rather than screenshotting all this sort of stuff, because right now we don't really know what the scope of the show is just yet. It's so early on. I could just be pointing stuff out just because it looks interesting rather than really having anything to kind of base singling out parts of the trailer on. As it is right now, it's just, like I said, different species, dragons, dark magic. That's basically what I get out of the trailer. I'm kind of like, yeah, that's the Dragon Prince, and that's what we're here for. It really is just a case of I need to see more episodes before I fully commit myself to being like, yep, I really, really like this show. I'm committing to reviewing the rest of it. So, yeah, that's all I really wanted to say here. Just some general thoughts on the show. So, again, next Friday, my plan is to review all of the episodes. Like I said, I'll do 3 videos, each covering 3 episodes of the second season. And there may or may not be a podcast review then at some point as well. But even if we don't decide to do the podcast review for season 2 of The Dragon Prince, I'll do other videos covering it as well. You'll see probably at least one other one after those initial 3 covering the initial reactions, where I give more of a detailed review of season 2 and I suppose where the show is overall. And then maybe after that we can get into doing stuff like theories, depending on how, I suppose, built up we are in the world and that sort of thing. Because of course, if we get to Friday and people watch the show immediately, people are going to be asking where's season 3. They sort of need to be on that if they are planning such a big, multimedia kind of thing for this show overall and it to last a long time. They probably should be fairly on board about committing to telling us that, because let's not forget that when the first season aired, they were fairly vague in the aftermath of that, even though it was a very popular initial reaction. It did take them a little longer than you expect to confirm that, like, oh yeah, we are doing more. Confirmation of season 2. I hope they're much quicker confirming it here, if at all possible. If they could have something that like they directly have maybe a season 3 trailer or confirmation type thing come out on the same day, that would be great. It's really what they need to do to build momentum for the show, because I think in some ways leading with so few episodes led to the show coming out. It's really good. Oh, but like we're stopping after 9 episodes for like who knows how long before we come back. Now I think the hype is still there, but if we have to do that again and they're just as kind of lacking in information, it could be a whole different story. So just they need to be very, very active about confirming the future of the show. But other than that, I think they're in a good spot, and I am excited for Friday. I hope this is the group of episodes that fully gets me invested. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into the Dragon Prince Season 2. What do you think is going to happen? What are your thoughts on the trailer that they put out? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.